7 winters had passed since his wolf last spoke, 7 long, merciless years since the night his mate died beneath a red sky. Since then the beast had gone silent, entombed behind walls of duty and crown. But now, that scream, something in it called to what was buried in him. Not rage, not hunger, recognition, and Adric's heart, which had forgotten how to ache, clenched hard against his ribs. He turned as the gates opened. The guards dragged her in. A girl, shackled, barefoot, mud clinging to her skin like bruises. Her hair was white as first frost, her eyes the grey of storm water. And when she lifted her gaze to him, across the torchlight, across the centuries, the silence in his chest broke. His wolf roared. It tore through his bones like thunder waking a corpse. It roared her name, Eowyn, though he did not yet know who she was or why that name burned his tongue like a forgotten prayer. The court recoiled. The Alpha-King, who had not shifted in 7 years, staggered back with a sound half-growl, half-gasp. Some called it madness, others called it fate. But the seer, Maeve, only whispered, "The moon remembers what man forgets." And so began the story whispered in every pack and every kingdom that followed. The tale of the Omega who woke the dead wolf, and the king who tore his crown to keep her alive. Chapter 1. The Omega brought in chains. The hall of Blackridge was built for kings who feared silence. Every stone knew how to echo. Every torch trembled in its own reflection. Tonight, even the fire seemed to watch. The guards shoved the girl forward, her wrists bound in iron cuffs, darkened by rust and blood. She stumbled once, twice, before she caught herself. The chain hissed across the floor. The sound was so small, yet it carried like thunder through the chamber. Adric sat upon the wolfstone throne, the mark of his line carved into its back, a wolf devouring the sun. He had faced warlords, usurpers, and the endless moaning of winter, but the sight of the girl undid the stillness in him. Something inside him, something he thought long dead, trembled awake. "Who brings her?" His voice rang out, low, steady, dangerous. It was the voice of a king who had forgotten mercy. A guard knelt. "Found her beyond the frostwood, my king. Alone. No scent of pack." She was humming. Maeve, the seer, stepped from the shadows. The bells woven into her sleeves sang softly as she moved, in a tongue older than this hall. Eowyn raised her head. Her eyes met the Alpha-King's, unflinching, unbowed. She did not speak, but something in that silence felt like the memory of a song he'd once known. "She carries no pack mark," Maeve murmured, circling her. "And yet—" "The moon clings to her skin like guilt." Adric descended from the throne. Each step echoed until the hall itself seemed to hold its breath. He stopped before her, close enough to see the tremor at her throat, the faint blue veins beneath frostbitten skin, the iron digging into her wrists. "What are you?" he asked softly. Eowyn's lips parted. For a heartbeat he thought she might answer, but she only whispered, so faintly that it could have been the wind. "Forgotten." The word struck him like a blade through old armor. Forgotten. As though the world had misplaced her, as though some cruel god had erased her name from the moon itself. His wolf surged, pressing against his ribs, furious and alive. He stepped back sharply, breath ragged. The hall stirred. The guards shifted uneasily. Maeve's gaze deepened, her eyes milky with sight. "The lost, remember the lost," she said. "She is your omen, Adric, the one that wakes what should never wake." "Enough," he growled, but even his voice shook. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Rain began to fall in slow, deliberate drops against the windows, each one like a heartbeat. Adric turned from her. unwilling to face the truth rising in his chest. "Take her to the lower cells," he ordered. "Chain her. No one speaks to her without my command." But as the guards pulled her away, she looked back once, and for the briefest instant he felt the ghost of her scent, the faintest trace of wild roses buried under ash. His wolf whispered through the silence, "Mine." Chapter 2. The Wolf Beneath the Throne. The rain did not stop until dawn. It whispered through the stone corridors, a steady hymn of water and wind. The citadel of Blackridge slept uneasily. Guards paced their posts with torches guttering in the damp air. Somewhere beneath the throne room, far below the marble and iron, a cell door moaned against its hinges. Eowyn sat in the dark. Her wrists bled where the cuffs had cut too deep. The air tasted of rust and old storms, and every breath she took left a shiver crawling down her spine. She had known prisons before, but never one that seemed to listen. When she closed her eyes, she could still feel his gaze, that quiet violence in the Alpha-King's eyes, the way his presence filled the hall like the shadow of something too large to name. The moment their eyes met, something inside her had recognized him, not as savior, not as enemy, as memory. She pressed her forehead against the cold wall. Beneath the stone she could hear it, faint but certain, the echo of a heartbeat not her own. The wolf beneath the throne the villagers had whispered when she was a child. The ancient Alpha whose spirit had never died. She had not believed them then. Now she wasn't sure what she believed. Above, Adric sat in the throne room long after the fire died. He had dismissed the guards, sent Maeve away, and locked the hall behind him. Alone, he sat in silence, staring at the same iron cuffs they had used to bind her. He could still smell her in the air, faint, delicate, wrong. It made no sense. She was no wolf of his blood, no daughter of his land. And yet... He rose. The wolf within him, dormant for 7 years, shifted beneath his skin. A growl rolled through his chest before he could silence it. "Not now," he whispered. But the beast inside did not listen. "She's ours." He gripped the edge of the throne until his knuckles went white. His breath came rough, uneven. The wolf's voice wasn't the distant echo it had been for years. It was raw, alive, clawing for release. "She's nothing," he said through his teeth. "A stray. A trick of fate. Liar." The word tore through his mind like claws on stone. Thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. Somewhere below, a chain rattled, faint, but enough to make his pulse stutter. He could feel her presence even from here, as though the air itself bent toward her. Adric dragged his hand down his face. "Curse this," he muttered, and left the hall. In the cell, Eowyn did not sleep. When she heard the slow, deliberate footsteps echoing down the stairs, she did not look up. She knew who it was. The scent of him, ash, pine, and something older, reached her before the torchlight did. The iron door creaked open. He stood in the doorway, silent for a long time. Rain whispered behind him, caught in his hair, dripping down the wolf marks scarred along his jaw. His eyes found hers in the half-light. The look in them was not cruelty this time. It was confusion, recognition, a kind of exhaustion that had no language. Eowyn spoke first, her voice rough but steady. "You shouldn't be here, and yet I am," he said. "You think I'm a curse?" He hesitated. "You are... something..." The corner of her mouth lifted. Not a smile, but a ghost of one. Something can mean anything. Fear, fate, folly. Adric stepped closer. The chain between her wrists glinted. "Tell me your name." "You already know it," she said softly. The air between them thickened. Adric's jaw tightened. He hated that her words felt true. He reached out, almost, then stopped, his hand trembling in mid-air. The air hummed. The wolf inside him pushed forward, hungry for the warmth it had been denied for years. He turned away sharply. "You'll stay here until I know what you are." As he left, Erwin's voice followed him, faint as a sigh. "Then you'll never leave me." He froze for half a heartbeat, the words landing like an old prophecy whispered back to life. Outside, lightning cut across the night sky, illuminating the towers. For one breathless instant, both of them looked toward the same moon, divided by stone and fate, yet bound by something older than either could name. And somewhere in the forest, an unseen wolf howled, not in hunger, but in recognition. Chapter 3. The Forest of the First Howl. The next morning came dressed in grey. The rain had stopped, but the mist refused to leave, draping itself over the citadel like a shroud. Adric hadn't slept. He stood at the high windows of his chamber, watching the valley breathe beneath the fog. Somewhere beyond that veil the forest waited, vast, ancient, and patient. Every alpha was born knowing its pull. Every child of the moon knew its sound. But this morning, the forest seemed to be calling a name he did not want to hear. A knock at the door. Maeve entered, her cloak heavy with dew. She carried no bells today, no riddles, only the solemn weight of news. "You feel it too," she said quietly, "the stirring beneath the pines." "I feel many things I wish I didn't," Adric replied. She studied him. "The forest has begun to move again. The hunters say the ground hums beneath their boots. It means the old lions are waking." He turned to her, tired of riddles. "Speak plainly." Maeve sighed. "It's her, Adric. Whatever she is, she's stirring what you buried. The wolf, the bond, the past, all of it." He looked away, jaw tightening. "She's a stranger. Then why does the stranger make your wolf remember how to breathe?" The words landed softly but cut deep. He had no answer, only silence. Below the citadel, Erwin traced a finger along the damp stones of her cell wall. The scent of the forest drifted in through the narrow slit of a window. It smelled of wet bark and distant thunder, like a promise she couldn't reach. The guard who brought her water refused to meet her eyes. Everyone here was afraid of something they didn't understand. When Maeve appeared outside her cell, she didn't flinch. The seer's face was unreadable, the lines of age and knowing woven gently into her features. "Why did you cross the Frostwood alone?" Maeve asked. Erwin didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head, studying the woman before her. "You can see things others can't. Tell me what you see." Maeve's gaze softened. "A girl who carries too many ghosts. And yet you fear me," Erwin whispered. Maeve hesitated. "Not fear, caution. The last time a wolf and an omega like you crossed paths, kingdoms burned." Erwin's lips curved slightly. Then perhaps kingdoms were meant to burn. For a heartbeat, the two women stood in silence, the air between them charged with the weight of truths neither wanted to speak aloud. That night, Adric rode into the forest. He told no one. He needed air, space, distance from the pulse that had followed him all day. But the deeper he went, the stronger it became, that quiet, familiar hum beneath his ribs. The wolf stirred, restless, alert. The forest was alive, mist curled around the trees like breath. Each step his horse took sank into the wet earth. The scent of rain and pine was sharp enough to sting. And somewhere ahead, a sound, soft, low, like a sigh. He dismounted. A pool of water lay before him, reflecting the broken moon. The air trembled. The wolf inside pressed closer to the surface of his skin. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't fight it. He let the world fall away. The throne, the weight, the silence. All that remained was the pulse of something living, something that called his name without words. and in that silence he heard her, not her voice, her heartbeat. Back in the citadel, Eowyn's head snapped up, chains clinked, her breath came sharp, shallow. She could feel it too, the answering echo in her chest. Two hearts, caught in the same rhythm, divided by stone and fear. Outside, the forest wind rose and howled, the first true howl in 7 years. Chapter 4. The Chain That Trembled. The castle did not sleep that night. Wind gnawed at the shutters, and the torches in the lower halls burned low, casting thin veins of gold across the damp stone. The wolves in the valley howled until dawn, calling for something they could not name. Adric stood alone in the armory. The scent of steel and smoke filled the air. Rows of spears and shields glimmered faintly. His reflection wavered in the blade of a halberd, a man with eyes too old, shoulders bent beneath a crown he no longer felt worthy to wear. The wolf beneath his skin stirred again. It did not snarl, it waited. He slammed the blade back into its rack and turned away, but the sound of the chain in the distance, just one brief rattle carried through the corridors, made him stop. It came from below, her cell. He cursed softly and descended the spiral stair. Each step echoed in rhythm with his heartbeat. When he reached the bottom, he found her sitting on the floor, her back to the wall, wrists bound, head tilted toward the tiny slit of moonlight. She spoke without turning. "You came—" He froze. "How did you know?" "You breathe differently than your guards." Her voice was quiet, neither mocking nor humble, only certain. He stepped closer. The chain trembled between them, a thin line of silver catching the light. He crouched, letting the torchlight fall across her face. Her eyes reflected the fire, not like mirrors, but like wells that could drown a man who looked too long. "Tell me the truth," he said. "What are you?" Eowyn's lashes lowered. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me. I was promised to a pack that doesn't exist anymore," she said slowly. "When the hunters came, I ran. I thought the forest would hide me, but it only traded one cage for another. Who hunted you?" Her silence answered him. She pulled her knees closer, as if to protect something unseen. Adric exhaled, the sound heavy in the quiet cell. "I don't know why you stir my wolf, but—" "It's not me," she interrupted softly. "It's what you buried." He stared at her, caught between anger and something far worse, understanding. Above them, thunder grumbled again. The light in the torch flickered, stretched, and went out. For a heartbeat, only the sound of rain remained. Adric felt his hand reach forward before his mind allowed it. He didn't touch her. He simply rested his palm against the wall beside her, close enough that the heat of her breath brushed his wrist. Eowyn looked up. "You fear what you feel. I fear what it makes me remember. What do you remember?" He hesitated, then whispered, "The night my mate died." The words hung between them, bare, fragile, too heavy for air. She didn't move away. Instead, she lifted her chained hands slightly. The iron links quivered, chiming once, like the smallest bell. "You carry ghosts," she said. "But so do I." He drew back, breaking the moment. "You'll rest here tonight. Tomorrow I'll decide what to do with you. And if I ask to leave—" He met her gaze. "Then the wolves outside would finish what the hunters began." Eowyn smiled faintly, as if she'd already accepted the truth of cages. When he turned to leave, the chain rattled again, a tiny trembling sound that followed him all the way up the stair. That night, Adric dreamt of snow. He stood in a white field, unarmed, the wind clawing through his hair. From the far side of the plain he saw a figure walking toward him, barefoot, wrapped in mist. She looked like Eowyn, but her eyes were gold, and the chain between her wrists had become a thread of moonlight. She touched his chest and said, "Wake, before the forest remembers your name." He woke before dawn, sweat cooling on his skin. Outside, the wind carried a howl that sounded eerily like her voice. Chapter 5. When the Wolves Began to Kneel. Handwritten, ancient romance tone, lyrical, sensory, and alive. The snow fell differently that morning, not in storms or gusts, but in slow, soundless veils that blurred the world into silence. The citadel roofs bowed beneath the white, the black banners of the Alpha-King hanging still, heavy with frost. Inside the great hall, wolves shifted in their human skins, guards, servants, lords, all drawn by a strange restlessness that none dared name. Erwin walked through the corridor like a whisper. The chains were gone now, though she still carried the ghost weight of them on her wrists. Wherever she passed, the air changed, not warmth, not even peace, but something remembered. The wolves lowered their eyes, not out of fear, but instinct. "Why do they bow to her?" one of the lords murmured near the stone pillars. Adric heard it. He said nothing. He sat upon the obsidian throne, still as carved granite. Yet inside, the quiet was ending. His wolf, the beast that had not stirred for 7 years, pressed against the edges of his mind, restless as a tide against stone. He watched her approach, the hem of her cloak damp with melted snow, her eyes steady as though she knew what she was walking into. When she reached the steps below him, she paused, not to bow but to listen. "You hear it too," she said softly, her voice trembling like wind over frozen reeds. He rose from the throne. "Hear what?" "The forest," she whispered. "It's calling the pack back to their knees." And before anyone could speak, the sound came, faint but real, a distant howling rising through the snow-wrapped world. Not of one wolf, but many. The guards froze. The elders exchanged glances. The wolves were kneeling, not to the king, not to the throne, but to her. Erwin looked up, her breath white in the cold air. "This isn't me," she said, almost to herself. "It's something waking through me." Adric stepped down from the dais, each word measured, dangerous. "Then learn to control it, or I will have to—" Her gaze didn't waver. "You can't command what already knows your name." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The world outside was nothing but snow and wolves, a sea of silver eyes in the storm. And in that silence, Adric understood the truth he'd been denying since the first night he saw her. His wolf had not died. It had only been waiting for her voice. Chapter 6. The Blood That Remembers. The council room smelled of iron and cold stone, the scent of old laws and older pride. Adric stood at the head of the long obsidian table, his hands braced against it as the voices rose around him. "She should not remain within these walls," snarled Lord Fenric, his grey wolf flickering just beneath his skin. "Since her arrival, the moon trembles, the pack disobeys, and your beast—" "Careful," Adric said, the words soft but deadly. The hall fell silent. The firelight painted his face in shadows, catching in the faint scars along his jaw. His eyes, once cold silver, now glowed faintly with the wild gold of a wolf no one had seen in years. Fenric lowered his head, but the damage was done. They all saw it. The Alpha's control was fraying. Adric could feel it too, in the quickened thrum beneath his ribs, in the way every sound of her name made his pulse ache. Erwin. Even now, beyond the council doors, he could sense her presence as one might feel the moon rising. "Your Majesty," said Maeve, her voice quiet, cautious. "The girl carries something ancient in her blood. It may not be power born of choice, but of inheritance, a forgotten thread tied to the first wolves." Adric's eyes flicked toward her. "You think I don't know what blood runs through my walls?" She bowed slightly. "I think you've forgotten what it remembers." He turned away, jaw tightening. Outside, snow pressed against the stained glass, dimming the light until the room felt buried in twilight. "She is an Omega," he said finally. "Nothing more." But the words betrayed him. His pulse stuttered at the lie. When he left the chamber, the corridors were empty, heavy with the scent of rain instead of frost. He found her in the courtyard, standing beneath the old wolf statue where snow melted into rivulets at her feet. Erwin didn't turn when he approached. "You can feel it too," she said. He stopped behind her. "Feel what?" "The call," she whispered. "The pull that isn't yours or mine, but something in between. The blood that remembers what it was before it was divided." Adric's throat tightened. "You speak as if you know it." Her gaze lifted toward the clouds, eyes full of pale fire. "I dream it. Every night. A silver wolf and a shadowed one. They fought once, not for love, but for the right to survive. And when they died, their blood mixed beneath the same moon." She turned to him, voice soft. "Tell me that isn't our curse repeating." The wind rose, catching her hair, scattering frost like glass dust between them. He should have turned away. He should have ordered her gone. Instead, Adric reached out, his gloved hand hovering an inch from her cheek, and stopped. "If it is," he said quietly, "then I'll find a way to break it." Erwin looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, in a voice barely audible, "Or it will break you first." The howl that followed split the horizon, raw, ancient, echoing from the forest's edge. Every wolf in the citadel froze. The blood moon had risen again. And in its light, the Alpha King felt his heartbeat answer, not to the moon, but to her. Chapter 7. The howl beneath the blood moon. The night bled red. Snow no longer looked white under that light. It looked like the earth itself was remembering its wounds. The citadel bells had stopped ringing hours ago, melted in their throats by fear, and the wolves that once guarded the gates now prowled the courtyards with eyes full of lunar fire. Adric moved through the smoke-cold corridors with Erwin at his side. He had stripped away the royal cloak. The black silk dragged too much of the past behind it. What clung to him now was only breath, the scent of iron, and the heartbeat of the woman he should have surrendered. Outside, the pack had begun to gather. Shadows of men becoming beasts, beasts becoming judgment. The howl of the blood moon rolled through the stones like thunder finding its home. Erwin touched the wall with her fingertips. The carvings there, wolves, moons, vines, shivered under her touch as if alive. "They're calling you," she murmured. "They're calling for my head," he said. "Then why are you still here?" He didn't answer. Because the truth was smaller than pride and heavier than loyalty, he could not leave while she remained within reach of death. A crash split the hall. The council doors burst open. Lord Fenric and 3 warriors poured through, their half-shifted forms snarling beneath torn cloaks. "Alpha no longer," Fenric growled. "The pack kneels to the one who bleeds beneath the moon, not the king who hides from it." Adric stepped forward, voice low. "Then let the moon choose." The air snapped, crimson light spilling between them. Erwin's breath hitched. The mark on her wrist burned through the frost. The wolves hesitated. For the briefest moment, the scent of submission, wild and old, rippled through their ranks. She whispered, "They remember me." And that was enough to turn the tide. Fenric's snarl broke into confusion. His knees struck stone. Around him, others followed, trembling, caught between instinct and fear. Adric's chest rose, the beast inside him roaring to the surface. But it wasn't rage anymore. It was recognition. He caught her arm. We have to go, before the moon decides again. They ran, through the courtyard where fire met snow, through the gates that had never opened for mercy. Behind them the pack howled in 1,000 voices, warning, longing, grief. Ahead the forest waited, vast and silvered, its trees leaning like witnesses. When they crossed into the first line of pines, the noise of pursuit vanished. Only the blood moon followed, enormous above the branches. Erwin slowed, panting, eyes bright with fear and wonder. "It's quiet." "No," Adric said, scanning the darkness. "It's listening." Somewhere deep in the woods, a single answering howl rose, low, ancient, and unbearably sad. The forest echoed it, as though mourning something it could not name. Adric looked at her, the red light softening the scars across his face. "Whatever comes next," he said, "the world will remember tonight." Erwin's voice was a whisper of frost. "Then let it remember us." The moonlight deepened. Around them, the trees began to move. Chapter 8, The Forest That Remembers Their Names. The forest did not begin where the gates ended. It began where breath turned to silence. Every step Adric and Erwin took sank into layers of frost, roots, and memory. The trees were colossal, their trunks black with age, their branches woven like cathedral arches. Mist drifted between them, glowing faintly red from the dying light of the blood moon. No wolves followed, no wind moved, only the sound of their hearts, two rhythms that refused to separate. Adric walked ahead, every instinct half-shifted, his senses sharpened beyond comfort. The forest smelled of wet stone and forgotten blood. Yet beneath that, so faint he almost missed it, was her scent, wild honey and winter ash. It disoriented him more than danger ever could. Erwin paused beside an old oak that looked burnt from the inside. Her fingers brushed the bark, tracing the deep grooves. "These aren't cracks," she murmured. "They're letters." He turned, brow furrowed. "You can read them?" She nodded slowly. Old tongue, the one the first wolves spoke before they learned to shift. Her lips moved soundlessly, then her voice returned, small and steady. "We were one, and the moon split us. We were whole, and the blood remembered." Adric felt the words settle in his chest like a heartbeat too heavy to carry. "Who taught you that language?" he asked. "I don't know." She looked away, eyes reflecting the red light. "Maybe the forest did." They kept walking until the trees grew thinner and the mist began to breathe with them. Somewhere far off, water whispered, a stream curling around ancient stones. Adric stopped there, crouched beside it, and stared into the current. The moon's reflection swirled like molten metal, and for an instant 2 shapes appeared in the water, a white wolf and a dark one circling each other. He blinked, and they were gone. Erwin knelt beside him. "You saw it too." "Yes." "Then it's true. Whatever bound them is waking in us." He wanted to deny it, to say this was madness, but his pulse betrayed him. The bond hummed between them, fierce and quiet, like a string pulled too tight. Every breath she took tugged at something buried deep in him, something older than language. "Erwin," he said, her name breaking on his tongue. "If this curse—" "Then we break it together," she interrupted, her voice low, trembling but sure. The words hit him harder than any blade. Together. As if such a thing were possible for a king and an omega, as if the laws of packs and blood and centuries could bend to the will of 2 souls that had found each other in the wrong lifetime. Adric reached out before he could stop himself, his hand brushing her wrist where the faint mark burned silver. She didn't pull away. The air between them thickened, alive, a heartbeat away from something that could undo the world. And then the forest exhaled. 1,000 whispers rose at once, leaves shivering as if in prayer. Between the trunks, faint figures appeared, shapes of wolves made of mist and memory, their eyes glowing pale blue. They surrounded the two of them but did not attack. Eowyn turned slowly. "They're not alive," she whispered. "They're remembering." Adric felt his wolf press forward, unbidden. "Remembering what?" Her gaze met his, calm, mournful, full of the weight of centuries. "Us." The wolves bowed, the trees sighed. The blood moon broke through the clouds one last time, bathing them in red light, and the mark on her wrist and the scar on his chest flared with the same glow. In that moment, neither spoke, but both knew. Whatever bound their blood had just awakened the past, and the past was coming for them. Chapter 9. The Wolves of the Forgotten Sky. The first light of dawn arrived like a wound reopening, red at the edges, gold beneath, bleeding slowly across the forest floor. Eowyn woke to the sound of the trees breathing, not the wind, something deeper. Every leaf turned toward the rising light as though remembering the color of life. She sat up, snow-crusted hair falling against her cheeks, and for the first time since the night began, the air no longer smelled of blood. It smelled of earth after rain. Adric stood a few paces away, watching the sun struggle through the branches. The mark across his chest still faintly glowed. He had pressed his palm over it so often that the skin there was raw. "They'll come by daylight," he said. Eowyn nodded. "Let them. The forest isn't theirs." He almost smiled at that, a small, tired thing that made her heart ache. "Nor mine, apparently." Before she could answer, the mist thickened, curling low and silver, swallowing the color from the morning. A hum rose from the ground, the same note that had filled the citadel's stones the night the blood moon appeared. Then, from the fog, shapes began to form. 2 wolves, one white, one dark as soot. They circled each other, perfect mirrors, until their bodies blurred and became 2 figures cloaked in starlight. Their eyes were endless and kind, their faces both familiar and not. Eowyn's breath hitched. "They're the first," she whispered, "the ones from the carving." The figures did not speak, but their voices filled the air all the same, woven through wind and heartbeat. "We were torn apart so the packs could survive. But blood remembers what it was made for." The words struck through Adric like thunder. He fell to one knee, hand to the earth. Beneath his fingers he felt it, a pulse, vast and old, running beneath the roots. "They're not ghosts," he said. "They're memory itself." The white figure turned to Eowyn. "When one line forgets, another is born to remind it." Light spilled from their joined hands, and in that light Adric saw flashes, his ancestors kneeling beneath twin moons, a promise sworn and broken, a child carried into exile. And at the center of it all, the same eyes that now looked at him from Eowyn's face. He reached for her instinctively, their hands met, and the light folded inward. For an instant, the forest held its breath. Then, a horn, sharp, real, human, the vision shattered, the mist tore apart, echoes of bootsteps barking orders, the metallic scent of steel. The council's hunters were already in the outer ring of trees. Adric pulled Eowyn close. "They found us. How? The blood moon leaves a trail in its own light." He turned, scanning the trees, his voice low and urgent. "Go east, find the river and follow it. I'll draw them away." She caught his sleeve. "You'll die." He looked at her then, really looked, and whatever walls he had built as king fell quietly in that gaze. "I already did, the night I let them chain you." The noise grew nearer. Wolves breaking brush, men shouting. Eowyn's eyes filled with the color of the rising sun. "Then don't die again," she said. "Run with me." He hesitated, one heartbeat, and that was enough. The first arrow hissed past, striking the tree beside them. Bark exploded in a shower of splinters. Adric took her hand. "Together," he said. And they ran, through mist and root, through the half-light that still burned with ghosts, chased by the pack that had once sworn to die for him. Behind them, the horn sounded again, and the forest answered with a growl that did not belong to any living wolf. The past was no longer remembering. It was awake. Chapter 10. The River That Divides the Moon. By the time the forest thinned, the snow had turned to water. The river cut through the valley like a blade, wide and silver, reflecting the ghost of the setting blood moon and the newborn sun above it. Two halves of light never touching. Eowyn stumbled down the embankment, breath ragged. Her boots slipped in the mud, her hands scratched raw from running. She didn't realize she was crying until Adric caught her arm. "Careful," he murmured. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled. "We can't stop. We already have," he replied. She looked up. The river ran faster than it should have, the current wild and furious, as though the forest's heartbeat had poured into it. Across the water, mist hung thick, hiding the mountains beyond. "That's the border," she said. "If we cross, we leave your pack's lands." "My crown's lands," he corrected softly. "Not my heart's." The words were simple, but they unmade her. She turned away, blinking hard. "If we go over, they'll hunt you as a traitor. They already do." He sank to one knee by the river, cupping the water in his palms. The light turned it red, then white, then clear again. "My father once told me this river was the first wound the world ever took, a scar where the moon's tears fell. It's where the packs split. And you never crossed?" "Never had a reason to," he said, looking up at her. "Until now." She stared at him. The man she had once feared, then hated, then couldn't stop seeing in every shadow. "Why me, Adric? Why this?" He hesitated, as though the truth itself might kill him. "Because when I look at you, I remember who I was before I became king, before I let duty bury my soul." Silence. Only the sound of the river between them, whispering the language of things that have seen too much. Eowyn knelt beside him, her voice barely a breath. "And what happens if we cross it?" "Then the world forgets us," he said. "The packs will erase our names from the lineage, our bond will live, but no one will remember why." "Would that be freedom or exile?" "Maybe both." Another horn sounded in the distance, faint but closing. The forest behind them shuddered with the sound of pursuit. Adric rose, pulling her with him. "It's time." Eowyn stared at the river. The water seemed to shimmer, 1,000 faces flickering across its surface. Wolves, kings, children, lovers, all dissolving into light. "It's alive," she whispered. "It remembers us." "Then let it judge," Adric said. They stepped forward together. The instant their feet touched the current, the world changed. The water went still. The sounds of pursuit vanished. Every reflection in the river froze. And for one heartbeat, they saw themselves not as fugitives, but as something whole, wolf and flame, king and exile, past and present reunited beneath twin moons. The water surged. They crossed. On the other side, the air was warmer, the snow gone, the trees blooming with white petals that fell like ash. The scent of rain and earth filled the silence. Adric turned to look back, but where the forest had been was now only mist. No sound, no pack, no horns. Eowyn's hand found his. He closed his eyes. "Whatever's waiting ahead, we go together." "Together," she whispered. "Even if the world forgets our names," the river behind them murmured in reply. A voice older than any oath, promising that nothing truly forgotten is ever lost. Chapter 11. The Land That Forgot the King. The first sound that met them was birdsong, soft, questioning, as though the forest itself was unsure whether dawn had truly come. Erwin had never heard it before. In her world, the howls of patrols and the distant growl of boarders filled every silence. But here, in this unnamed valley, even the wind spoke differently. It moved slow and heavy through the trees, carrying the scent of wet moss and wild violets, whispering like a mother's breath against her child's hair. She pressed her hand to her chest. The rhythm there was strange, too fast, too alive. For so long she had lived as if half dreaming. Now every sound, every colour hurt with its sharpness. Adric walked ahead, his coat torn from the crossing, his dark hair damp with river spray. There was no crown on his head now, no mark of the Alpha-King, only a scar along his neck, faint but burning beneath his skin. The mark of power, now fading. He stopped at the edge of a clearing. The valley stretched before them, wild, unclaimed. Hills rolled like the backs of sleeping beasts, and rivers wound through them like veins of silver. Small houses of wood and stone were scattered across the distance, smoke curling from their chimneys. Adric frowned. "I thought this land was empty." "It isn't," Erwin whispered. "Maybe it never was." A figure appeared among the trees, a woman, older, her eyes bright with the strange stillness of those who have survived the unspeakable. She wore no crest, no rank, no scent of pack or hierarchy, and yet the wolves around her, silent shapes in the mist, lowered their heads when she approached. "Welcome," the woman said softly. Her voice was smoke and sorrow. "You've crossed the river of forgetting." Erwin stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I was once a healer to kings," the woman said, "until I learned that power is a sickness no medicine can cure." Her gaze fell on Adric. "I know what you are, son of the Moon Throne. You've brought ruin across that water." "I've brought truth," Adric replied, though his tone was weary. "Or maybe just regret." The woman smiled faintly. "Here, both are the same." She led them through the trees, down winding paths where flowers bloomed even in shade. Children ran barefoot through the moss. Erwin saw wolves lying beside humans, their eyes bright with calm. No one knelt, no one obeyed. There was no dominance, no submission, only breathing, living, remembering. "This place," Erwin began, "exists outside their laws," the woman said. "We are those the packs cast out. Omegas, traitors, cursed ones, the forgotten." Her eyes softened. "You are safe here. But safety comes with memory's price." Adric's jaw tightened. "I've already paid too many prices." "Then you'll pay the last one," the woman said, stepping close enough for her breath to touch him. "To remember who you were before the crown claimed you, and to face what you did in its name." For a moment, the air trembled. The wolves in the clearing lifted their heads, as if something unseen had entered the space, an old echo of power, rising like heat from the earth. Erwin's hand brushed Adric's. His skin was cold, his pulse fast. He looked at her, and for a heartbeat she saw him as he once was, not a king, not a savior, but a boy raised on oaths he never chose. "Stay with me," she said. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. "This place knows too much. Then we'll forget together." She pressed her forehead to his chest. The heartbeat beneath her ear thudded like a drum calling the dead awake. For the first time he held her, not as something to protect, not as something to lose, but as something he could finally keep. Outside, thunder rolled, distant, over the border they had crossed. The packs were stirring. War was coming, and in the valley of the forgotten, a forbidden love had begun to bloom. Fierce, defiant and doomed to be remembered by the land that forgot its king. Chapter 12. The Wolves That Remembered. It began with a scent, rain, smoke, and the faint, familiar tang of metal and fur, the scent of a pack on the move. Erwin smelled it before dawn. She woke from half-sleep, the sound of breathing around her, villagers, sleeping wolves, the whisper of trees, dissolving into dread. When she stepped outside the cabin, the sky was bruised purple, trembling with thunder that hadn't yet broken. Mist coiled around the valley's edges, hiding the mountains like ghosts holding their breath. Adric was already there, standing barefoot in the mud, shirt open, gaze fixed north. His skin was pale beneath the stormlight, every muscle tight as if listening to something too deep for ears. "They found us," she said softly. He nodded once. His jaw worked, a quiet war behind his eyes. "I felt them in the wind an hour ago. The packs are coming through the river, but the river doesn't stop the dead," he said, voice breaking around the truth. "Only the living who choose to forget." Erwin stepped closer. "You think they'll kill us?" "No," he said, looking at her now. "I think they'll burn everything to remind the world who rules it." She shivered, not from the cold, but from what she saw in his eyes. A flicker of something ancient, like the echo of an oath carved into blood. The wolf beneath his skin stirred, restless, hungry. It was not the beast of rage she had once feared, but something older, grief given form. "We can run," she whispered. "We can't," he replied. "If we leave, they'll slaughter everyone who took us in." The valley's matriarch, the old healer, appeared behind them, her grey hair wet with dew, her eyes bright as stormlight. "They know," she said simply. "They remember who you were, my king." "I'm not their king anymore," Adric said. "Maybe not. But their memory doesn't care for truth, only blood." The first rumble of war drums echoed over the hills. Wolves began to stir, their growls low and uncertain. Mothers called for their children. The air grew thick, heavy with electricity and fear. Erwin turned to Adric, her voice trembling. "What will you do?" He stared toward the horizon where the mist began to darken. "I will meet them," he said. "Alone." "No." The word left her mouth like a knife. "You can't. I have to." He reached for her hand, and she felt the tremor there, not fear but resolve. "If they see you, they'll use you. You're what they can't control, what they'll try to destroy first. I won't hide while you die." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurts more than tears. "I've died before, Erwin. You brought me back." She gripped his wrist, nails digging into his skin. "Then let me keep you alive." Thunder cracked. The scent of burning pine rolled through the wind. From the tree line beyond the river, silhouettes began to move. Dozens, then hundreds, wolves armored and howling, their eyes burning like coals. The healer raised her staff. "Their memory has come to devour us," she said. "Then let them choke on it," Adric answered. He stepped forward, the storm flashing behind him. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating his face, half man, half shadow, every line carved from loss and defiance. His wolf rose beneath his skin, golden eyes opening like suns in darkness. Erwin watched him walk into the storm. Every heartbeat felt like glass breaking inside her. The valley around her roared with fear and fire, and all she could do was whisper his name, not to stop him, but to send him strength. Then the first howl split the air, deep, ancient, full of history. It wasn't from the invading pack, it was from the wolves of the valley, the forgotten ones. They remembered. One by one they joined him. Omegas, outcasts, healers, broken wolves, all those left behind by the crown, rising now behind the fallen king. The valley shook with unity, with the song of the forsaken. Adric turned once, his gaze finding Erwin through the storm. She mouthed the words she couldn't scream, "Come back to me." He nodded, once, then disappeared into the fire. Chapter 13. The Blood That Remembers Light. The storm had no beginning. It simply was. An old god made of wind and fire, roaring its judgment across the valley. Erwin stood on the ridge above the battlefield, her cloak whipping like a living thing. Below, the land churned with wolves, gold, black, and silver. A war of blood and memory colliding in the rain. Every cry, every strike echoed in her bones. Somewhere in that chaos was Adric. She could feel him. Even through the clash and thunder, his presence burned through the bond they'd never spoken aloud, but always known. Fierce, magnetic, undeniable. She gripped the talisman the healer had pressed into her palm before the battle. It pulsed faintly, like a living heart. "Your blood carries something older than the moon," the healer had whispered. "If you call it, it will answer, but it will not stop until it's taken what it's owed." Erwin hadn't asked what that meant. Now she understood. Her fingertips were already glowing faintly red, threads of light weaving through her veins. She could feel the valley breathing with her, trees bending, water rising, the ground humming beneath her bare feet. She closed her eyes. Through the storm she saw flashes, Adric breaking through the enemy line, his wolf form towering, golden eyes burning like dawn through the smoke. Each strike was desperate, each roar a plea. He was fighting not to win, but to make sure the valley still existed when she reached him. Erwin dropped to her knees, pressed her palms into the earth, and whispered the old words she'd only ever heard in dreams. The ground shuddered. Light bled through her skin, flowing outward. Down the hills, across the rivers, through the bodies of wolves locked in battle. The first thing to change was the sound. The growling stopped. The snarls dissolved into silence as a red mist swept over the valley. Wolves turned their heads toward her, eyes softening, remembering. Every creature who had forgotten their own name now whispered it back to the sky. Even the alpha warriors from across the river faltered, confusion and awe breaking through their fury. The war stopped breathing. Adric turned, his chest heaving, eyes finding her across the silence. "Erwin," he said, his voice lost in the thunder. "What did you do?" She didn't answer. Her body trembled with the power's pull. Blood dripped from her nose, each drop glowing as it touched the ground. "I remembered for them," she whispered. "I made them see." Adric ran to her, stumbling, shifting back into his human form mid-stride. When he reached her, he fell to his knees, catching her before she collapsed completely. Her skin was burning, her breath shallow, her heart a wild, breaking rhythm against his hand. "You're killing yourself," he said. "I'm saving what you tried to protect." Her lips trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. "Don't let them forget again." He held her close, pressing his forehead against hers. "You should have let me be the one." "I already did," she breathed. "You just came back." Thunder crashed, the last sound of the war breaking. Light poured from the valley floor, rising like dawn. The wolves bowed their heads one after another, as though honoring something too sacred for words. Even the rain stilled, and in that impossible quiet, the Alpha King, stripped of his crown, his name, his power, carried the woman who had remembered light back through the valley she'd saved. The healer waited by the river, staff in hand, eyes full of sorrow. "She did what even the gods forgot how to do," she murmured. "She forgave the world." Adric laid Erwin beside the water. The current shimmered, turning clear again, as if the river itself bowed to her. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Her skin was pale, but her lips curved faintly like a secret kept between souls. "Don't go," he whispered, but the wind only carried her answer. "I'm not gone. You'll remember me in every sunrise that bleeds." The healer's voice trembled like a hymn. "When blood remembers light, nothing truly dies." Final chapter. The dawn that forgets nothing. The morning after the war was too quiet. No drums, no cries, only the sound of wind stirring through broken branches and the slow dripping of rain from leaves. The valley lay wounded but alive, wrapped in a light that felt both strange and holy. Adric stood at the river's edge. The water shimmered where he'd laid her. Erwin, the woman who had turned memory into mercy. She looked almost asleep, her hair fanned around her like spilled ink, her hands still open as if waiting to be held. He couldn't bring himself to close it. Behind him, the wolves were gathering, the once forgotten packs, outcasts, wanderers, orphans, now stood together beneath the newborn sun. There was no crown, no throne, no hierarchy, only silence and the sound of hearts beating the same rhythm. The old healer approached, her staff leaving prints in the damp soil. She gave them back their names, she said softly. She gave you back your heart, Adric's voice cracked. And what do I give her? The healer looked toward the horizon, where the sun bled gold over the mountains. You remember, that's all she ever wanted. He sank to his knees beside Erwin. The world had ended and begun in her arms. He thought of the night she'd found him in the forest, the wild, broken king who could not howl anymore, and how her silence had taught him to listen. He thought of the river, the crossing, the choice that had undone them both, and he thought of the light that had poured from her, not to destroy, but to heal what war had forgotten. He brushed his thumb over her cheek. You said I'd remember you in every sunrise that bleeds, he murmured. Then I'll make the world rise again every day, until it does. He rose slowly. The wolves bowed their heads one by one, until the valley itself seemed to kneel. When he spoke again, his voice was low, but it carried. There will be no kings here, he said, no thrones, no crowns, only memory and mercy. Every wolf who stands beneath this sky will remember the blood that saved them. Every child born will learn her name. He turned to the river once more, the water glimmering like glass. For a heartbeat he thought he saw her reflection beside his, smiling, her eyes full of dawnlight. Then the current took it, and the image dissolved. Adric didn't weep. He simply placed his hand on the water and whispered, Run free, my heart. The moon remembers. The valley exhaled. Wind through trees, light through mist, wolves howling one long, endless note that rose like prayer. It wasn't grief, it was remembrance. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the world in gold and silver, the river of forgetting shimmered once more. Not as a wound, but as a scar that had learned how to heal. For the first time in 1,000 years, the dawn forgot nothing. And somewhere, beyond light and shadow, two souls, once bound by war, now free, walked together through eternity's quiet fields. Epilogue, the garden that blooms in memory. From the recovered journal of Adric Vale, written 50 winters after the War of the River. The snow comes later now. Gentler, almost as if the land itself remembers her touch and waits for her before it falls. I live by the river still, not as king, nor wolf, nor savior. Just as a man who once forgot how to breathe until she reminded him. The valley has changed. Children run through the meadows that once burned, their laughter echoing where screams once lived. The wolves walk among them without fear. When night falls, the moonlight bends differently here, softer, golden, alive. They say the river no longer erases names. It remembers. When travelers cross it, it whispers stories, her stories, to their reflections. Some say they see her face for a heartbeat, smiling beneath the current. The healer is gone now, but her words remain carved into the stone by the water's edge. When blood remembers light, nothing truly dies. I used to dream of seeing her again. Now I only dream of her voice, not as sound but as warmth, like sunlight through glass. Sometimes when I walk at dawn, I hear it in the rustle of leaves or the cry of a wolf somewhere far off. It says my name the way only she could, not as a command but as a promise kept. I planted a garden by the river where she fell. It blooms every season, no matter the weather, no matter the frost. White flowers with veins of silver. The villagers call them Erwin's breath. Every child born here learns her name before they learn to speak their own. They know the story, not of war, nor kings, nor wolves, but of a woman who remembered the light and a man who learned to follow it. And when the moon rises full and the river glows like a vein of living memory, I light one candle on the water. I watch it drift, and I whisper, the dawn forgets nothing, not even us. Then the candle winks out and I smile because I know she's still here. In the way the valley breathes, in the way the river sings, in every heartbeat that dares to remember love. A final note, written in another hand, perhaps that of a descendant or a historian decades later. The garden still blooms where the old wolf once wrote his final words. Some say that when the moon touches the river, two shadows appear, one crowned in gold, the other wreathed in light, walking hand in hand beneath the silver trees.